Hello there everyone, and welcome to Altenew Academy, and welcome to the Creative Jumpstart class with the Nostalgic Memories release. So today we'll be creating this card that features a beautiful, kind of hidden gatefold message. So first up, I am going to be using the Nostalgic Florals stamp set. This is a 6x8 stamp set. You can see all of the beautiful images on here, and we will be using all of them. As I am going to be using a dye ink to stamp these, I'm going to make sure that I have these properly prepped. So I have my stamp conditioning eraser, and I'm just going to rub that all over the top of the stamps. I'm not actually pressing too hard, I'm just kind of kissing the top of it just to take away any debut that may be there. So once that has been done, I can then take my stamp positioning tool, and I am going to stamp all of the images. So I have a piece of cardstock. This is 5.5 by 8.5, and it's £80 Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. So as you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the elements from the stamp set, all of the images, and I'm just going to pop them into place onto the white cardstock, pick them up with the lid, and I'm then going to ink them. So as I said before, I am using a dye ink, so I'm using the jet black ink from Altenew. I find that this works really well if you are gonna do some ink blending straight away. So if I was able to kind of stamp my images, then leave them to dry nicely, I would kind of opt for the obsidian or maybe heat set that one. But as I wanted to be able to quickly work with these, the best kind of ink to use is a dye ink. So that's why I've gone with the jet black. So once I've stamped half of them, I've turned my piece of cardstock around and then added the rest of them in as well, again with that jet black ink. So once I have my images done, we can then go ahead and stencil them. So I have these stencils which coordinate, and I've just popped the first stencil into place on the leaves. Now this is going to pop around both of the leaf clusters on this smaller flower cluster. And I have in fact used the marshland and then the sea forest right at the kind of center point or the base of those leaves to add in that darker look. And I'll be doing the same technique for all of the flowers and all of the pieces as well. So once I'd done the leaves, I moved the stencil over, and I'm just going to do exactly the same here again, just popping that into place onto the stamped image. I'm first going to use some of the Canyon clay ink using a small blending tool to kind of add colour all the way over the petal, but not the same depth of colour. So I've added more ink to the center or the base of the petal, and then kind of graduated that ink out. And then once I'm happy with the amount of ink that I had there, I then took the burnt red on a mini blending tool. This is going to add a smaller kind of concentration area of ink, and just at the base of that petal to give us some really great depth and interest to the design. So once I had finished all of the petals on one of the flowers, I'm going to add in the flower centers, and I'm going to add the flower centers all in the same color as well. So I'm just going to be using the pumpkin pie ink for those, just on one of those mini blending tools. As you can see, I'm doing exactly the same technique of all of the petals on this flower too. So I've used the Canyon clay on the small blending tool to add the color to the petal itself. And then to add that darker look right in the base or the center point, I've then used the mini blending tool with a little bit of that burnt red ink. I just love the gradient effect that this gives. I mean, you can do this if you use your markers, your artist markers. You can definitely get this kind of look with the blending of this beautiful blending, but it would take a lot longer than just taking your ink tool, a little bit of a stencil, and just kind of throwing that ink around a little bit. So I have done this flower exactly the same colors as before. So I used the marshland to do the base of the petal, and then added a really dark sea forest color just right at the edge of the petal, just so we're going to get that really dark shadowing. If you're not really into this really dark look and you wanted the whole ink to be exactly the same, you can do that as well. I would just recommend that you add a lot of ink layers just all over, rather than kind of concentrating at the base or the center of the petal. And that's going to give you a all over look. It gives it more of a I don't know, cartoon look, which is really, really cool, rather than this kind of soft ethereal look. So I'm going to keep going with this until I have all of the images done. I am doing the same colors as before. So we have the marshland and the sea forest for the leaves and stems. And then we have the canyon clay and the burnt red for the petals. And then for the flower centers, we are going to go in with that pumpkin pie. You may find that you don't need to kind of ink your tools up all the time, because these tools do tend to kind of grab onto that ink and make sure that it goes a long, long way. So I'm just going to finish this leaf here, and then we're going to be all set to move on to the next part. So what I'm going to do once everything has been done is I am going to add a little bit more detail. So I'm just using the Woodless colouring pencils from Altenew. This one is the crimson, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flick from the centre of the flower up the petals to add in kind of like veiny looks, a little bit more depth and dimension and detail just to that centre. As you can see, I'm not paying too much attention. I'm just kind of putting my pencil down at the centre of the flower and then flicking out. And I'm just doing a number of these flicks. You want to make sure though that when you are doing this is you don't go perfectly straight. You do want a kind of curve, even if it's a tiny curve to your flicks. That's really going to make a huge difference to the way it's going to make your petals look, because the way that those petals curve or those lines curve is the way that your mind is going to think that those petals are curving. So just adding a little bit of curve is really going to make a huge difference to this. Once I have added my little flicks, I then use my finger just to kind of burnish those lines out a little bit. It's not going to kind of get rid of them completely, but it will subdue them a little. So for the leaves as well, I'm going to do the same thing, and I am using the moss pencil for this. Again, just adding a few little flicks from the base of the leaf just to add in that really dark look, and also a little bit of added detail. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. You don't need to worry about it too much. You don't really need to think about it. Just adding those little kind of details is really going to add a lot to your overall finished card. But at saying that, you don't have to do this part if you don't want to as well. It's still going to look really, really pretty, but it's just not going to have that depth that you're going to get by adding the lines in at this point. So once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to add a little bit of the orange to the flower centers just to add that in a little circular kind of motion there. Once that's done, we are going to die cut all of these pieces. So I have the coordinating die set for the nostalgic florals, and I'm just going to pop those into place around the images and then just add a little bit of tape just to keep them in place. Now I do find that this satin masking tape from Altenew works perfectly for this, so it means that those pieces are not going to move around when you do run it through your die cutting machine. So once I have all of my pieces, I can just move those over to the side, and I'm going to work on our card base next. So I have two card bases, which are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and these are both landscape folding cards. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up both of the top corner, top left corner, and the bottom right corner, and I am going to diagonally cut 2 of these exactly the same way. And this is going to give us our gatefold. It is going to be hidden later on, but I do find that this is a really kind of fun, different fold for your card. You could definitely just keep it just as it is if you wanted to without covering it up with the florals, but that's completely up to you. So you can see when we pop them two together, you are going to get that gatefold kind of diagonal look there. So to keep these two together, I am going to use some of the ultra sticky tape from Altenew, and I'm just going to add that onto one side of the cards. And then when we remove the backing, we can just place the other card straight on top of this one, and then we're going to get that really cool look. This would be great for invites as well. So if you're doing a lot of wedding invites, I think this kind of fold would be kind of modern and very, very cool to do as well. So once we have our card base, we can then play around with how we want our florals to look. So I am going to kind of tuck these within each other to create a whole kind of card front with these ones. And I'm also adding the leaves just over that line that we have from the gatefold to kind of disguise that a little bit more as well. So once I'm happy with the placement, I'm just going to add some of that satin masking tape just over the top just to keep everything in place. And then once that's done, I'm going to add a line of where I need my foam tape to be. So adding that line in is going to make sure that I don't add any foam tape over that line. So, because if I did, it would stick the two pieces of the card front together and I wouldn't be able to open the card. Ask me how I know. I've done it before. So you do want to make sure that you've got that guideline there so you can make sure that you're not going to add any of your foam tape above that. So I am using that as a guide not to go any further. And I am using the Instant Dimension foam tape from Altenew. So once I've covered the bottom portion of the little floral cluster that we have, it is going to stick all of the elements together because we're kind of going over the die cuts. And I'm just going to remove all of the backing for that. I can then take the card and then place that into position back over the guideline. You can then take an eraser and get rid of the guideline just by rubbing it over with the eraser. Once that's done, I'm going to remove the little tapes that we have, keeping the pieces together. If you do find that it is a little bit of a struggle to kind of remove these, you can use a little bit of heat from your heat tool, and that will kind of heat up the adhesive so it's not quite so strong. Once that's done, I'm going to be taking the retro bicycle set and I'm going to be using two of the sentiments from here. I'm using the first large one and I am going to be stamping this onto some jet black cardstock. As I'm going to be embossing this, I've just used some anti-static powder. I'm just going to use some of the embossing ink from Altenew to stamp that into place, and I'm then going to be using some of the pure white embossing powder just to nicely heat set that. Once that's done, I am going to use the coordinating die to cut around that, and I just love this look with the white sentiment on the black cardstock, but then it's been cut around as well without me actually having to fussy cut myself. It is fabulous. So I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine. You can see that I'm just using the cute little mini blossom there. Once that's done, we can remove those and then we're going to pop that into position. Before we do that, I am going to take one of the other sentiments, which says enjoy the ride, and we're going to hide that underneath the florals right on this little flap that we have here. For this one here, I'm just going to be using the obsidian ink just to stamp that into place, and I think this is so cute when you open it up and you can see that little sentiment just ready for you right there. Once that's done, a little bit more of the Instant Dimension foam tape right behind the sentiment. I'm just going to add some couple of small pieces and then pop that into place onto the center of the card. When you open it up, then you can see the additional sentiment, and then the other little flap will kind of enclose your message on the inside. I really do hope that you've enjoyed the video today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. If you do create a card that was inspired by this, it'd be great if you do share. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you again really, really soon. Bye-bye.